So I've got a question. I've started the process. I need to turn my question into a hypothesis. How do I go about doing that? I'm going to try and change the slide first. What's going on there? There we go. So I've tried to say, my background in science, a lot of my stuff's going to be science related, but the hypothesis exists in much more in the social sciences and the broader humanities and when people do studies. So in a more general research situation, the hypothesis is a specific testable prediction, so prediction, about what researchers expect to find in a study. In science, short, clear statement describes what you think will happen to the dependent variable when you change the independent variable. So, for example, if the temperature is increased, then the plant height will increase. Okay, I've got my two variables in there. So, we got to talk variables, don't we? We talk about a lot in science, so hopefully it's nothing new. Those who are doing a bit of psych will probably know about it already. Simply stated, variables are things that can change or vary in your research. So the independent variable is a thing that you deliberately do change. You must say happens to the dependent variable when you do it. These are the two you think you know about. The dependent variable is a variable you will measure to see what impact changing that variable has, that independent variable has. And then the control variables are all the other things that could have impact on the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. And so you want to keep them constant. You don't want them interfering with your outcome. Otherwise, it's very hard to work out what's going on. So, for example, it's a bit of an example from that biology, horticulture area. I believe if I give plants sunlight, they will grow. So our first step is to brainstorm the variables. So the independent variable here is, of course, changing the amount of light. If I change the amount of light, what's going to happen? And the dependent variable will be growth of plants. So can I measure growth? So my control variables therefore need to be making sure I use the same plant or plants, lots of seedlings are the same thing. They have the same sort of age and condition. I use the same type and amount of potting mix. I want to put them the same size pots, give them the same sort of mortar. So all these things are kept constant. We don't want those things interfering with the outcome. So then my hypothesis would be if I increase the amount of light that plants are exposed to, they will grow bigger. So if I change my independent variable in a particular direction, I expect the dependent variable to change in a particular direction. Yeah. So an example from some of those previous slides we had on research questions. What impact could planting native species around a school have on local biodiversity and student well-being? And for some reason, I've got the wrong independent-dependent variable in that slide. Isn't that terrible? What's the independent variable? Ignoring what I've written there. Planting native species. The dependent variable, well, it's cognitive function to some degree in this case, would be student well-being. Well, there's two there. It's not a great question, is it? It's got two variables there because the other one is local biodiversity. Therefore, the hypothesis could be if I increase the number of native plants in the school grounds, I will increase local biodiversity and this will increase student well-being. Don't like that. Too many dependent variables in this case. But that's the sort of thing you can try and create. Again, Gus has a lovely little image he created for the style sheets. So a good way to write a hypothesis is to use the following format. If the independent variable is increased or decreased, then the dependent variable will increase, decrease. That's a very science-based one. Okay, that's the way we do it in science. It sort of is what happens in other studies as well, without necessarily really clearly stating variables. So, in summary, consider your research question, work out what your independent and dependent variables are, and then rewrite that question. You rewrite the question so it's now hypothesis. If I do one thing, what will happen to the other? And we'll talk about the other variables later when we start talking about method, because when you're planning your method, you're going to try and work out how to control those variables. And I hope that helps.